take it away, Nick. Give us a little overview. Tell us what we can expect. The underdogs, the favourites, the stars, everything.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each group, each team one by one. I'm very conscious it's going to be a lot of my voice, so come in whenever you want, lads. But we're going to start off with Group A there. So Group A containing Norway, New Zealand, the Philippines, and Switzerland. So Norway probably favourites in that group. Former winners of the tournament in 1995. They haven't been in the best of form in the last couple of years. Of course, they lost 8-0 to England in the Euros last year, which was, kind of a national embarrassment for them being such a powerful, footballing nation. And a very, very difficult 2023 for them so far. They lost to Sweden and Denmark already this season. So they're going in as the top seeds, but probably on a lower ebb compared to some of the other stronger teams. Host New Zealand, or co-host rather New Zealand, they don't look too promising at the moment coming in as co-host. They've lost 7 of their last 10 games, are winless in those last 10 games as well. They were hammered by Portugal 5-0, who were debutants in this competition as well. And in 5 attempts at the World Cup, even though they consistently qualify, they've yet to ever win a game in the World Cup. So in terms of hosts, a little bit like Qatar last Christmas, they're probably going to have a big struggle. The Philippines, so this is their first ever tournament. There's actually 8 teams, lads, making their debuts in the tournament, including Ireland. Philippines being one of them. They basically had a massive overhaul of their system and how they produce players in the women's game. And as we know, there's a massive Filipino community all over the world, including in Ireland. But they pull a lot of their players from the American college system. Naturally coming through a very, very strong system representing them. So they've qualified. They have a very promising team. Expected to be, I suppose, one of the whipping teams of the tournament, but they're there nonetheless. And then finally, as I said, the Swiss, who've only been in one previous World Cup and are going to host the next European Championships in 2025. Probably similar kind of level to us, similar kind of level to Ireland. They'll be, I suppose, hoping to garner a bit of interest in this World Cup as they build a bit of momentum for the European Championships. Now, onto Group B and some familiar teams. So, top seeds there, Australia, the hosts. Now, Australia's best performances have been quarterfinals, and they've managed to get into 3 of them. Very, very unlucky not to get to the semi-finals in 2015, where they were considered one of the favourites. And, of course, very, very key household names as well. Sam Kerr, a player that a lot of people will be familiar with. Charlotte Grant, Kyra Cooney-Cross, Lydia Williams, again, one of their kind of veteran players, but will be a household name within the women's team or the women's game. They are considered one of the favourites for the tournament. I suppose the fact that they're hosts and also given their really, really good form. They beat England in April 2-0, and that ended England's 30-match unbeaten run under Serena Wiegman. So they are really, bringing a bit of momentum into this tournament. As I said, the fact that they're hosts, they're going to be playing in front of 83,000 fans against us in a couple of days' time. They are going to have that home advantage, but this is a team that are expected to get to at least the semi-finals and are being touted as possible favourites. Now, I know we're going to talk about them in a bit more detail later on, but of course, the Republic of Ireland. So, Girls in Green, one of the other debutant teams in this World Cup. Again, a playoff win over Scotland getting us there. Very, very promising team. Vera Pauw, one of the top coaches in international football in the women's game, and some very, very promising players. Of course, we're going to speak about some of them a little bit later. Katie McCabe naturally is, I suppose, one of the best players in Europe at the moment, getting in the Champions League team of the season. So there'll be a lot of eyes on Ireland. We are underdogs. I know we're going to elaborate on it over the next couple of weeks. We are underdogs, and I think we need to appreciate that. And the game against Australia, we beat them last year. I think that's worth keeping in mind, but it's going to be a tough road. But I think out of all of the, let's say, minnow or smaller debutant teams in the tournament, we are probably one of the strongest along with the likes of, say, Switzerland, who would be around our level. Nigeria. So Nigerians have actually qualified for every single tournament since the Women's World Cup began. But they're coming into the tournament with some very, very poor forms. They've won their last 3 games, having lost 6 on the trot just before that. Now, they do have a couple of very good individual players. Asahat Oshala of Barcelona, Rahishat Ajibade of Atletico Madrid, and Uchene Kanu. I don't think she's any relation to the former Arsenal player. 3 players who are very, very promising. However, they are not expected to do much in this tournament. Again, I think the game that we have against them will be very, very pivotal in terms of whether or not we progress to the next round. And then finally, Canada, who are the reigning Olympic champions, one of the top teams in the women's game. Surprisingly enough, they've only made one semi-final back in 2003, but they do have one of the best women's players ever in Christine Sinclair, 39 years of age now, and of course have some very, very promising and important players such as Jessie Fleming, Julio Grosso, and Jodin Hutema, who are all in their early 20s and very, very young. But again, one of the top nations, hosted the tournament back in 2015. So again, they're a team that will prove very, very difficult for Ireland, but a team that might be a little bit more achievable to get a result against than the Australians. On to Group C. So this group contains Spain, Japan, Zambia, and Costa Rica. So in terms of the Spanish, they are a team who didn't actually qualify for their first World Cup until 2015, and then made, I suppose this is their third consecutive World Cup. They got out of the group in 2015, and then they got into the round of 16 a couple of years later. But I suppose the big thing for Spain is that Alexia Putellas, or just known as Alexia, I suppose, we're going to chat a little bit about her later. She's considered the best player in the world right now at the moment. She's a huge driving force behind that Spanish team. They are I suppose, one of the top teams from Europe in the tournament, but they are expected to do quite well with her. And the Japanese, who would have been a real formidable force. Of course, they won the tournament in 2011. Shock victory, I suppose, over the USA on penalties. Having said that, they have kind of lost their way in recent years. They are still a formidable force, still probably the best team in Asia, along with Australia, who play within the Asian Confederation, just like the men. They have kind of drifted off the radar a little bit, which is unfortunate for them, but they will be a very technically good team. Very, very easy on the eye to watch. I do remember that in particular from 2019. Very, very nice team to watch. And we can expect them to possibly cause a few upsets. Zambia, probably one of the weaker teams in the tournament. Of course, we played them a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? With a fairly comprehensive victory. Their last few games, obviously they lost to us, but two drubbings, a 5-0 and a 5-2 doubleheader against South Korea, where they looked very, very defensively vulnerable. That apparently was tightened up, but I didn't see any evidence of that against Ireland. They're another debutant team. They are one of the up-and-coming nations in Africa, but it looks like that they could be one of the whipping teams as well in this tournament. And finally, Costa Rica. So one of the top teams in CONCACAF within the North American region of FIFA, I suppose. This is their second World Cup, their first appearance coming in 2014. They have kind of struggled to, 2015 rather. They have struggled to kind of take things to the next level since then, and have suffered a few drubbings in the last couple of years. So that will be one of the weaker groups. Even the top seeds, as I said, Spain, they aren't necessarily favourites of the tournament. So a little bit easier than our group. Group D. So England, Denmark, China, and Haiti. So, of course, we know a lot about England. Obviously, the Lionesses winning the European Championship just last year. Very, very highly rated team. Probably one of the favourites of the tournament. And I think that they will fancy themselves. Of course, some world-class top players. Alessia Russo, Georgia Stanway, Alex Greenwood, just a couple of names to mention. And Lauren James as well, who actually could have played for Ireland. She's really come into her own the last couple of years. So they will be expected to compete for the tournament altogether. It does look like the way that the seedings are going, that they could end up playing Germany in the quarterfinals. So that will probably be the make or break of them. They will want to compete with the likes of the US, the likes of Australia, who of course did beat them earlier in the year. So, that England team is, as much as we slag them off, they're a very, very formidable team. They're quite a likable team, I think. And I know I'll probably get a bit of slagging for that, but they are a likable team. And they are expected to go very, very far in this tournament. The Danes, so this is actually their first World Cup since 2007, which is a bit of a surprise because, traditionally, I suppose, back in the 80s and 90s, they would have been one of the top teams in European football in the women's game. They've made two quarterfinals back in 1991 and 1995. And although they have come back in the last couple of years from the wilderness, it does look like England will run away with that group, which also contains China, who did lose the final in 1999 on penalties to the USA, and Haiti, who are also making their debut, I suppose in surprising circumstances as well, beating Senegal and beating Chile, who would be two decent teams in the international game. Now on to Group E, and I mentioned how some of the men's game has become very unlikable. Well, we're probably going to talk about one of the most unlikable teams in sport, apparently, and that is the USA women's national team. So we probably remember, I suppose, Mia Hamm, that celebration back in 1999 where she whipped her top off. Not the full lot, Dave. Don't get too excited. But again, that kind of put them onto the world stage. That really, really announced, I suppose, American women's football, even though it had been so formidable for so many years. One thing that they'll be looking at from a personal perspective is they will be the first ever national team, male or female, to win 3 consecutive World Cups. So that's really, really on their mind at the moment, and that's something that they'll be looking to emulate. They've had 3 straight defeats this year at the end of 2022, and that was to England, Spain, and Germany. So they are coming into the tournaments as hot favourites. However, they have had mixed fortunes in the last year. Of course, their key players, Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe, who of course is retiring at the end of this season after the tournament. So when I mention them being unlikable, there's, I suppose, in the last tournament in 2019, a couple of things, not really things to get offended about, but it did kind of upset the footballing community. I suppose they beat Thailand 13-0 in the group stages. And it wasn't the fact that they beat them 13-0, but I think it was the nature of their celebrations, the nature of the way they played, that kind of thing. Again, I don't see anything wrong with it, but that seemed to piss a lot of people off. And also Alex Morgan's teacup celebration. Do you remember that, lads?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, the teacup celebration against England, which was considered a bit
furious.
Yeah, it's considered a little bit distasteful, but to be honest, I thought it was kind of funny, a bit cringe, a little bit cringe. It's kind of, stereotypical of Americans nailing a stereotype of different nations, isn't it? But look, they had the last laugh, really. Another kind of key player and someone who's really worth mentioning is Trinity Rodman, of course, the daughter of Dennis Rodman. So she is one of the key players in that USA team. The second seeds in that group are the Netherlands. So, of course, they lost the last final. So it's going to be a rematch of the 2019 final. Some excellent players there, a lot of them based in England. They are a very technically good team, and they are expected to compete with the USA. But again, a little bit like England's group, the USA are expected to run away with that group. Portugal, who I will be supporting if they get to the knockouts and we don't. It's nice actually having both teams in the tournament. Their World Cup debut as well. They've been in 2 European Championships, put up a decent showing in both of them, not really making any major headway or anything like that. So this is a major achievement for them, also going in through the playoffs, just like us. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that the Benfica women's team performed very, very well in the Champions League this season. The good bulk of that team are represented in this Portuguese team. And then the final team in Group E is Vietnam, another debutant. And it looks like this is going to be a very, very difficult tournament for them. Very recently, France, who we played last week, they were 6-0 up against Vietnam at halftime, and eventually the game ended 7-0. But there seems to be a lot of struggles there. Again, similar to the Philippines, they have called on players from other nations, but again, it looks like that they will struggle. Group F. So Group F containing France, Brazil, Jamaica, and Panama. That's a very colourful group, isn't it? So the French wouldn't be like a French team, lads, would it, if it wasn't for a little bit of drama in the build-up. So I don't know if you guys remember Hervé Renard. He's the coach who pulled off that shock victory for Saudi Arabia against Argentina last December. He's actually taken over as the national team coach. He also won the African Cup of Nations with Zambia. So again, a guy who's gotten the best out of kind of limited teams. But he is taking over a very, very strong French team, a team that is really expected to compete. He came in for Karine Diakara after she lost her job after long-term discontent from the squad about her managerial methods, where a number of players said that they actually wouldn't play for her anymore. So Renard, as it was I suppose it was a massive shock for the Saudi Arabian Federation that he was taking this job. Probably didn't go down well either, and I don't mean that to be funny, but he is a very, very highly rated coach. Again, they will be, I suppose, maybe not one of the favourites to win, but they will certainly be one of the favourites to compete. The fact that Lyon have won the Champions League 6 out of the last 8 seasons, again, a big bulk of that team is representing this French side. It will kind of represent well for the French and their chances in this tournament. Brazil, so not necessarily the same as their male counterparts. They always compete. In recent years, they haven't. I suppose they haven't competed as much as many people would have thought on the world stage. They are the South American champions. They did win the Copa America. So, that is kind of a bow to their string. Marta, who's kind of their most recognizable player, I suppose, she has suffered injuries in the last couple of years, and they will be hoping that she's back and fully fit for the tournament. Jamaica, so similar to the Filipino squad that we spoke about a little while ago, how they have a lot of Americans. The Jamaicans have a good combination of Americans and English players that kind of qualify in the granny rule. Their star player is Bunny Shaw, who's one of the top players in England. She's playing for Man City and just scores goals for fun. And I think it's worth noting as well that Bob Marley's daughter, Cedella, has actually pumped a lot of money into this Jamaican side. So they've gotten a lot of substantial funding, and they've some really, really top players. A little bit like the men's team, they are kind of an up-and-coming nation of international football. And finally, Panama, who are another CONCACAF nation along with Jamaica, they will also be making their first team debut. And they have a few players playing in kind of the major leagues in the US. So US-born Riley Tanner of Washington Spirit, she made her debut in their playoff win and already made an instant impact. She's considered a top player over in the States. Group G, so Sweden, Argentina, Italy, and South Africa. So Sweden, always considered a powerhouse of the international game. 3 semi-final appearances, finishing third each time, and they did reach the final in 2003, but they did lose to the USA. So a lot of kind of experts, I suppose, on the women's game reckon that that Sweden do kind of lack the overall quality to go all the way, but have a very, very solid team that's coached by Peter Gerhardsen, who looks like he's stepping away after the tournament. I suppose in 2019, they beat Phil Neville's England to third place. So again, another powerhouse, but not expected to go all the way. Argentina, unbeaten in 2023, winning 4 or 5 games. Not expected to emulate the men's team from December. They have had a bit of an inconsistent run over the last couple of years and aren't really expected to compete too much. And Italy, so at least their women managed to qualify for the World Cup. The guys didn't. Last summer, they were knocked out of the European Championships after bagging only 1 point in the group stage. So another team that aren't expected to be up to a huge amount either. South Africa, the reigning African champions, actually beating Morocco 2-1 in last year's showpiece. So Desiree Ellis is their coach, a very, very highly rated coach, former South African international, and she plays a very, very expansive brand with the South Africans and a very exciting brand. So the team aren't expected to get past the group stages, but they are expected to play a brand of football that's very, very easy on the eye. And finally, lads, Group H. It's a lot of talking from me, isn't it? It's a huge amount from me at the moment. And Jesus, I'm trying to get all the notes right. But finally, Group H. So Germany, Morocco, Colombia, and South Korea. So the Germans naturally going to be one of the favorites of the tournament. Of course, lost last year's European Championship final to England. Expected to mount a major challenge this year. A lot of key players there: Lena Oberdorf, Clara Buhl, and Giola Gwyn, all youngsters in the last World Cup and all key players now. As I mentioned already, if Germany do progress and their group stage draw, I suppose, is favourable, then we're probably looking at a rematch with England in the quarterfinals. So the winner of that will probably get to the final. 2 times champions, they're a formidable force, probably one of the top nations in international football. And again, them and the USA are kind of considered the 2 favourites. Morocco, another debutant, yet another, the 8th and final. So create a history by qualifying for this World Cup. They do have an English-born player, Rosella Ayan of Tottenham, and she is kind of one of the driving forces behind that team. Again, they're another side, just like the men's team. I know I keep bringing men's teams into it, but there are comparisons somewhere. They do have a lot of granny rule players, I suppose French-born players as well. And as I mentioned already, they did lose the African Cup of Nations last year to South Africa. So a team that are on the up. Colombia, we know all about them, lads, don't we? They like a crunching tackle. So a bit of controversy last week with the tackle on Denise O'Sullivan. The runners up in South America, losing 1-0 to Brazil last year, and haven't ever progressed past the round of 16 and failed to qualify for the last World Cup in 2019. So again, a bit of South American flair. Expect to see a bit of tough tactics from them, but thankfully it doesn't look like we're going to meet them in the tournament at all. And finally then, South Korea. So achieved their best ever finish at the 2022 Asian Cup in order to qualify for this World Cup, reaching the final after a shock 1-0 victory against Australia in the quarterfinals, who of course are one of the favourites for this tournament. So again, a team a little bit like the Japanese, very, very technically good, very, very easy on the eye to watch. but not expected, unfortunately, to compete overall. So they're the teams, lads. I tried my best there. There was a lot of a lot of notes to try and get out there, but look, those are the teams, and that's the tournament as it is.
Well, there you go. Everything you need to know about the tournament, brought to you by Nick. They're fantastic stuff.